Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. Welcome to the online lecture on linear control systems. Today we are going to continue the review of this course, and this is the third part of the course review series, which will be comprising of 4 parts. So far we have discussed the modeling part and the stability analysis part of the linear control systems, and also we have started the discussion on the performance analysis. In that context, we already discussed the steady state analysis. So today we are going to start our discussion with transient response specifications for linear control systems. So in terms of transient response specifications, there is a list of specifications that you can use to measure the performance of an LTI system in terms of transient response. First, there is percentage maximum overshoot, which is the maximum value of the output minus the steady state value of the output divided by the steady state value of the output. So this is the normalized value between 0 and 1, which is multiplied by 100 to indicate the percentage. Then settling time is the time to reach and remain within 5% or 2% of the steady state value. Sometimes the requirement for settling time could be more strict, for example within 1% of the steady state value, but more or less the definition remains very similar. Rise time is the time to by the way, in this course we will go with the 5% of the steady state value as the settling time. So time to rise from 10% to the 90% of the steady state value is the rise time for the system, and delay time is time to reach 50% of the steady state value from the initial time. So like you start with some initial in LTI systems we assume 0 initial condition, so you start with 0, and from 0 to 50% of the Y steady state, the time to do that is delay time. So this is the diagram or graphical depiction of all the performance specification. You can see here that this is the response of the LTI system. Basically this is a step response. So you can see here that you start with 0 initial condition, and time to rise from 0 initial condition to 50% of the steady state value, that is delay time, and time to go from 0.1 or 10% of the steady state value to the 90% of the steady state value, this is rise time. And then similarly the time the maximum value of the response or maximum value of the output of an LTI system is Y max, and then the time to reach and stay within the 5% band. So this red lines show the 5% band, and black dotted line shows the steady state value of the system, Y steady state. So time to reach and stay within this band is settling time. So if the output response goes out of this band, then this point will not, for example see here that here the time the output has reached the band, but this time point is not settling time, because later on it goes outside the band and then it returns, and when it enters here then it never leaves the band. So that's the settling time value for you. So these are the performance specifications for LTI systems in terms of transient response. Then we look at the transient response of specific systems, for example first order and second order systems. So first order system is written in standard form as follows: 1 over tau s plus 1, where tau is the time constant of the system. Step response of a first order system is an exponential curve, which is represented by 1 minus e to the power minus t over tau, where t is the time and tau is the time constant, same as written in the transfer function. Percentage maximum overshoot of first order system is always 0 regardless of the value of tau. So this is very important to and very useful fact to remember. settling time of a first order system is 3 times, approximately 3 times tau, because if you put t is equal to 3 tau in this equation, the output y becomes 0.95, which is almost the steady state value. Remember that for t is equal to infinity, this term goes away, so steady state value of the output is 1. So 0.95 is about 95% of within the 5% range of the steady state value. Delay time for first order system is less than tau. It's probably around 0.7 tau or something like that. You can calculate delay time using this equation and the definition of delay time. Similarly, rise time is less than 3 tau. It's around about 2.3 or 2.2 tau, according to the definition that we have discussed before. But you can calculate the rise time, the exact value of rise time, from this equation and the definition of the rise time. Okay, so this is the typical response of a first order system. It starts with zero initial condition, it rises and exponentially settles down to the value 1, and in this regard there is never an overshoot in the first order system. And the rise time and settling time is about 3 tau, this rise time is less than 3 tau, delay time is less than tau, and so on. So this is a depiction of how first order system step response looks like. Then there is a second order systems. Second order system standard form is omega n square over s square plus 2 zeta omega n into s plus omega n square, where omega n is called natural frequency, and then zeta is the damping ratio, and zeta times omega n is called damping factor of the second order system. And then characteristic equation for the second order system is, of course, the denominator polynomial equal to 0, and when you find the roots of this, you solve this. This is a second order equation, so you can use quadratic formula to solve this, and then you get roots or poles of the second order system lie on minus zeta omega n plus minus omega n into square root of zeta square minus 1. And you can see here that the location of the poles of a second order system depend upon omega n and zeta. And similarly, this is how the location of a complex conjugate pole looks like. So we'll also discuss the location of each type of poles in the second order system. But if there is a complex pole in a system, in a second order system, then its vector distance of the pole from the origin, that is omega n, and the horizontal distance or x component of this omega n is zeta times omega n, and then this vertical component can be found using the Pythagoras theorem for right angle triangles. The angle theta of the pole vector from the negative real axis, this theta has an importance such that cosine of theta is equal to zeta. So from this angle you can actually determine the value of zeta for the second order system, and from this vector you can determine the value of omega n. For the second order systems, usually this length and this angle are important in terms of control design, because we want to achieve certain angle and we want to achieve certain distance, certain horizontal distance of the pole from the j omega axis. So these quantities are important. It is important to understand how zeta and omega n are related to the location of the pole in the complex plane for second order systems. Okay, so then there is classification of second order systems. First there is overdamped system. For overdamped system, zeta is greater than 1, and when zeta is greater than 1, the poles of the system are real and distinct, and the equation of the poles of the system is the same as in the previous slide, minus zeta omega n plus minus omega n into zeta square minus 1. Here, since zeta is greater than 1, so zeta square is also greater than 1, and the quantity in the inside the square root is greater than 0, which means that this whole part is real and this also real. So real plus so this is real number plus this real number is probably this pole, and this real number minus this real number would be probably this pole. So the response or step response of this type of second order system is very similar to the step response of the first order system, where there is no overshoot and it settles down to its steady state value eventually. But there is a key difference between the response of second order system, second order overdamped system, and the response of the first order system, and that key difference is right at the beginning of the response. So at the beginning of the response, first order system goes straight away like this, so with non-zero slope. If you go back to the previous slides, you will see that the first order system response has non-zero slope at the beginning, whereas the second order system has almost zero response at the beginning. So if you are looking at two step responses with zero overshoot, and if you are asked to tell which of the step responses belong to second order system and which one belongs to the first order system, you will be looking at the beginning of the slope of this system. So then the second type of second order system is critically damped systems. So in critically damped systems, the poles are zeta is exactly equal to 1, so the quantity inside the square root becomes 0, zeta square minus 1 becomes 0, so that part vanishes. So only this part remains in the equation of the poles, minus zeta times omega n. Both poles are located at minus zeta times omega n. So this is the location of the poles in the critically damped case, and this is the step response is very similar to the step response of overdamped case. So similar to the overdamped case, critically damped case also does not have any overshoot. Then there is underdamped case. In underdamped case, the zeta is less than 1 but greater than 0. So when zeta is less than 1, zeta square is also less than 1, which means that the quantity inside the square root is negative, which means that this term becomes a complex number, and once you add a complex number into real part and once you subtract the complex number into real part, so real part remains the same for both the poles, and real part is the distance of the pole from the j omega axis, the horizontal distance, which is zeta times omega n, which we already discussed in this diagram that we have seen in the previous slide, that this distance is zeta times omega n, and you can see here from the equation of the poles that indeed this is the case. And the step response of the underdamped second order system is the most interesting one, because it has everything, rise time, settling time, percentage overshoot, and everything that is used to measure the performance of any LTI system in terms of transient response. And then there is undamped system where zeta is exactly 0. When zeta is 0, the poles are on the j omega axis, because what happens is that the real part j into omega zeta into omega becomes 0, and then the part of with omega n into square root of zeta square minus 1 becomes square root of minus 1, which is simply j. So the poles that are plus minus j omega n, so which means that this vertical distance of the pole from the origin is omega n, and this is minus omega n. So now you can already see the so the step response of this type of a system would be oscillatory with 100% overshoot, and there will not be any steady state. Double integrator is another type where zeta is again equal to 0, but in this case omega n is also 0. So when zeta and omega n are both 0, then the second order system becomes double integrator, where both the poles are at the origin, S1, 2 are at 0, S equals 0. So the response of this type of LTI system is unstable. So this double integrator system is unstable. And you also should know from the stability theory that whenever there is a repeated pole on the j omega axis, a linear system would become unstable. Okay, then there are observation in the second order system. First of all, the time constant of a second order system is 1 over zeta omega n, which is similar to the time constant in the first order systems. So you saw that in first order systems the settling time is nearly equal to 3 times the time constant. Same is the case for second order systems. So for first order systems settling time is nearly 3 times the time constant, and same is the case for second order systems. More precisely, when zeta is between 0 and 0.7, the settling time is 3.2 over zeta omega n, and when zeta is between 0.7 to 1, then the settling time is 4.5 over zeta omega n. Note that this formula is applicable only for the underdamped systems. Then there is a time to reach the peak value or time to reach the maximum value, that is given by pi over omega n into 1 minus zeta square. And similarly, the percentage, the corresponding maximum value at this time instant is given by y max, which is 1 plus e to the power pi zeta over square root of 1 minus zeta square. This whole thing is raised to the power natural number e, and the percentage overshoot is 100 times e to the power minus e to the power pi zeta over 1 minus zeta square whole under 1 minus zeta square under root. So this is the formula for percentage overshoot, and note that the percentage overshoot depends only on zeta and it does not depend upon omega n. And the delay time is for second order system is given as 1 plus 0.7 into zeta divided by omega n, where zeta is between 0 and 1, which means that the system is an underdamped system. Precisely, delay time can be given by this formula: 1.1 plus 0.125 zeta plus 0.469 zeta square divided by omega n. And then rise time is given by 0.8 plus 2.5 zeta divided by omega n, or precisely it can be given as 1 minus 0.4167 zeta plus 2.917 zeta square over omega n. Then the second order control design example is the next topic of the course, where we try to design the controller using the transient specifications and the steady state error study that we have carried out so far. And given we look at the control design in terms of an example. So given the system, this is second order system with one pole at the origin and the other pole at s equal minus 1. You have to design a controller to achieve closed loop asymptotic stability, zero steady state error with respect to step input, percentage overshoot should be less than 5%, and settling time should be less than equal to 0.4 seconds. So it is very important in this course to memorize the fact that percentage overshoot of 5% corresponds to the angle of the complex pole equal to 45 degrees or less, which means that value of zeta should be greater than or equal to 0.7, which is an important number to remember in general. Even if you don't remember this number, you can always calculate the corresponding value of zeta from the percentage overshoot using the formula of the percentage overshoot, which will give you almost the same value for zeta. And then this is the block diagram representing this problem, where you have the plant, transfer function of the plant is given, transfer function of the controller is to be determined, and the input to the system is a step input, rather unit step input, because there is one here. So then PD, we tried in the original lecture, we tried the P controller on this example, and P controller did not work. And then we tried PD controller. Since this is the review of the course, so I will go straight to the PD controller. Since KP fails to achieve the transient response specification, we try the PD controller, and then the control transfer function of the PD controller is KP plus KDS, and the closed loop transfer function with the PD controller becomes something like this, where we are interested in this characteristic polynomial. Routh-Hurwitz stability criteria requires that all the coefficients of this characteristic polynomial should be positive. Coefficient of s square is 1, so it is positive already. Coefficient of s is 1 plus kd, It will be positive if KD is greater than -1, and constant coefficient is Kp itself. So for this coefficient to be greater than 0, Kp itself has to be greater than 0. And then steady state error with respect to step is 0, because the system is already type 1 system, because there is a pole at the origin in the plant. Then we look at the transient specifications, and the possible closed loop locations for the system are given by this equation. Remember that we have not studied the root locus part yet, so we cannot apply root locus here. We just have to look at the roots, the equation that describes the roots of the closed loop transfer function. So this is the this is the characteristic equation of the closed loop transfer function, second order equation. You apply quadratic formula, and this is the solution of the quadratic equation. So we have to look at this equation in order to determine whether we can have poles into this region or not. And then we let's suppose we choose the pole location anywhere within the admissible region, within this gray region, which is 0.8 more than 0.8 horizontal distance from the j omega axis to satisfy the settling time requirement, and within the cone of 45 degrees to satisfy the overshoot requirements. So if we choose the poles to be at -1 plus minus j, so here you can see that -1 is the real part of the pole, which is greater than 0.8. so this horizontally the pole is within this region. And similarly, since -1 plus j and -1 minus j, the real and imaginary part of the poles are equal to each other, so tangent inverse imaginary over real, which is the angle, which will become the 45 degree angle. So it is, the poles are somewhere around here, 45 degree angle and horizontal distance of 1 from the j omega axis, and similarly here -45 degree angle and a horizontal distance of 1 from the j omega axis. So by selecting these poles, we calculate the characteristic polynomial of these poles, and which turns out to be s square plus 2s plus 2. And using this characteristic polynomial, we can basically compare this with the original characteristic polynomial, where s square plus s into 1 plus kd plus kp. So we in order to match the desirable polynomial with the actual polynomial, we need kd equals 1 to make this total quantity coefficient of s equal to, and we need kp equal 2. So if we choose so this is desirable characteristic equation. If we choose kp equal 2 and kd equal 1, then we get the final control design, which is for this type of plant, the closed loop transfer function will become s plus 2 over s square plus 2s plus 2, and the controller will be s plus 2. So kd is 1, so kds plus kp is s plus 2. That's the controller for the for this plant, which meets all of these requirements. So the only thing to remember here is that since we have not learned root locus, we have not used root locus into this type of controller design. Effect of adding poles and zeros, we always add poles and zeros in the open left half plane. So how are the poles and zeros added? So you can see here that by designing this controller, this basically adds a 0 to the system, because this system has 2 poles and no 0. But when you connect in series this s plus 2, this makes the overall system will now have 1 0 and 2 poles. So compared to the open loop system, closed loop system has been added a 0 in the system. So this 0 has been added at s equal -2, which is the open left half plane. We always add poles and zeros in the open left half plane, and in feed forward control, adding poles and zeros cannot destabilize the system, but in feedback system, adding poles and zeros can actually destabilize the system. And adding poles usually makes the response more sluggish and may even destabilize the system, but adding zeros mostly makes the response faster and may increase the overshoot of the system. So these are the consequences of adding poles and zeros. We shall also look at the consequences of adding poles and zeros by the end of this lecture when we have revised the root locus. Alright, so then there is a concept of dominant poles. This concept is very important when you have a higher order system like third order or fourth order system, and you want to approximate the higher order system with a corresponding lower order system by ignoring one or two poles of the system. So the concept of dominant poles is such that some of the poles in the transfer function of the plant or a system are close to the j omega axis, and some of the poles are away from the j omega axis. And if such a case happens that there is a clear distance between a bunch of poles close to the j omega axis and a bunch of poles away from the j omega axis, then you can ignore the poles in this region which are insignificant poles. So poles in this region are dominant poles, and the poles in this other region are called insignificant because their contribution to the system response is very short duration. So the time constant corresponding to any pole is dependent upon the distance of the pole from the j omega axis. If the pole is very far away from the j omega axis, the contribution of this pole to the step response of the system is very short time duration. So its contribution, if you ignore the contribution of this pole to the step response, then it does not result in huge errors. So for the sake of simplicity, you can do approximations such that you drop the poles which are farther away on the left half plane. So insignificant poles may be dropped, but this should be done carefully. Why do I say that carefully? Because we look at an example of this is a third order system where we have two poles here close to the j omega axis and one of the pole is far away from the j omega axis. So obviously we'll be looking to drop this pole which is far away from the j omega axis and approximate this system as a second order system. But here the poles are at -10 is far away and -1 plus minus j are close to the j omega axis. So we have this situation where two poles are here and which are in this region, the dominant region, and one pole is in the insignificant region. So we can drop this pole, and so this pole is insignificant. If we simply drop this pole without any care, then this is the reduced transfer function that we obtain after dropping the pole. But if we look at this reduced transfer function, this reduction is not correct because the DC gain of this transfer function is not the same as the DC gain of the original transfer function, which will mean that there will be a significant change in the frequency response, and so we don't want that because it's important to have an approximation of the original system which behaves as similar to the original system as possible. So here in this case we have original, if you put s equal to 0 in the original system, it becomes 11 over 10 into 2, which is 11 over 20, and if you put s equal to 0 in the reduced system, it becomes 11 over 2, which is not the same. But if we make the reduction like this, 11 over 10 times s square plus 2s plus 2, so we get rid of the s plus 10 pole, but we also add a constant factor of multiplication of 10 in the denominator. So in order to preserve the DC gain, now if you put s equal to 0 in this system, the DC gain will be 11 over 2 into 10, which is 11 over 20, which is same as the DC gain of the original system. Now this is the second order approximation of this system, which actually is more similar to the original system. And then there is another way of cancelling additional poles and zeros, because why do we cancel pole and zeros and why do we approximate higher order system as a second order system? Because we have studied the response and the equations related to the second order system and the first order system, and we do not know how to characterize the percentage overshoot of a third order system. We do not know how to find the settling time of a third order system. So if we have a third order system in practice or in our projects in professional life, then we can at least approximate it as a second order system and try to estimate its overshoot and settling time and rise time, etc. So that is the motivation behind all of this study. So there is a way of cancelling additional poles and zeros and converting a higher order system into a second order system. That is by use of pre-compensator. This is a pre-compensator. This is additional control transfer function. This is your usual feedback control design. And how the pre-compensator works is the following: that you have C of s into G of s over 1 plus C of s into G of s. This is the single block for this whole feedback control diagram. And then when you use C into P pre-compensator control in series, then some of the poles of pre-compensator can cancel out the zeros in the closed loop system, and some of the zeros in the compensator can cancel out poles in the closed loop system. So in this way the overall transfer function will be that which you desire, which is almost a second order system. Alright, so then we go to the next topic of the course, which is root locus. Root locus is the one of the very important topics and tools in control systems design. Before we study root locus, we just look at how we go from an open loop to the closed loop. So whenever we have an open loop system and we close the loop, what happens to its transfer function? The numerator remains the same, so which means that zero of the system remain the same even after closing the loop, but the denominator of the system changes. So the study of how the denominator of the system changes in response to closing the loop and increasing the loop gain, that is basically root locus. What happens? Root locus basically answers the questions of what happens when we close the loop. Numerator and zeros remain the same, and the denominator and hence the poles change by closing the loop. Number of poles remain the same, only the location of the pole changes. So you can see here that this is the denominator. Usually the degree of denominator is larger than the degree of numerator for causal systems. So if the system is causal, which means that if the system is a real physical system, then this will have a higher degree. Adding numerator will not increase the degree of denominator, so degree of the denominator will remain the same and only the location of the pole will change. So root locus is the study of change in pole locations in closed loop system with respect to the open loop system. So the roots means poles and the locus means path. So we are looking at the path that is followed by the poles of a closed loop system when you increase the gain. So basic definitions, often we have this representation of open loop system in terms of this gain of root locus, and then also in the closed loop diagram is represented like this in different textbooks, where you, instead of having CS into GS in the direct path, you have GS in the direct path and HS in the feedback path, which does not make a big difference, because you can always make CS into GS as one transfer function and HS equal to 1, so that will give you back the same closed loop configuration that we have used in the remaining part of the course. But anyway, closed loop poles are defined by 1 plus k into G1s into H1s, which is the denominator of the closed loop transfer function. Here you can see that here if you write GS into HS as k times G1s into H1s, then 1 plus k times G1s into H1s is the denominator of the closed loop transfer function, and the roots of the denominator of closed loop transfer function are basically closed loop poles. Then there is this condition which is derived from this above equation, and using this condition we derive the magnitude condition, which gives us the magnitude of G1s H1s is 1 over k, and we derive the angle condition, which means that angle of G1s H1s is 2k plus 1 times pi, where k can be 0 1 2 3 4 5 or minus 1 minus 2 minus 3. So these are called angle conditions. And then there are some additional notations that if you imagine G1s H1s to be some numerator polynomial and some denominator polynomial, then the open loop poles are the roots of P of s equals 0, and the return this quantity 1 plus k into G1s H1s is called return difference, and the return difference can be written as 1 plus k into q over p, because G1s H1s is q over p. And then if you take p as an LCM, this is the expression for return difference, and in this expression it is clear that the closed loop poles are the roots of ps plus k times qs equals 0, which are basically the zeros of the return difference. So zeros of the return difference are closed loop poles, and the poles of the return difference, which are the roots of P of s equals 0, are open loop poles. So in this way, return difference is an important quantity which gives you the poles and the poles of the open loop system and the poles of the closed loop system in a single expression. Alright, so zeros of the return difference are closed loop poles, and poles of the return difference are open loop poles. Then we review the 10 rules of root locus. Rule number 1 of root locus design is that root locus originates at the open loop poles, which means that when the root locus gain k is nearly 0, the open loop poles and closed loop poles are at the same location. And root locus terminates at the open loop zeros, which means that when the root locus gain k is almost infinite, then the closed loop poles are at the same location where the open loop zeros are. Number of branches of root locus is equal to number of open loop poles, and number of branches means that the paths of poles. So for example, each pole follows a certain path, so total number of paths in a root locus will be equal to total number of poles in the open loop system, because poles in the open loop system is equal to poles in the number of poles in the open loop system is equal to number of poles in the closed loop system. Similarly, the asymptotes are found by theta naught equal 2k plus 1 over m minus n into pi, which means asymptotes are basically paths of the poles which are in excess with respect to the number of zeros. So in a causal system, number of zeros is less than or equal to number of poles, and if the number of zeros is strictly less than number of poles, then you cannot have the termination of the root locus at open loop zeros, because there are more poles than zeros in the system. So some of the poles will converge to zeros as the root locus terminates, but the other poles will go to infinity following certain paths. So this is the angle of the path of the pole going to the infinity in case when zeros are less than poles. So this angle depends upon the difference between zeros and poles. If this difference is 0, then this angle is undefined, which means that actually no pole is going to there is no asymptote in the system. Then there is a centroid point, which is basically the center of gravity point for the root locus, and this is also the point from where the infinity path originates or appears to originate. And then this is given by sum of all the pole locations and minus sum of all the zero locations divided by number of poles minus number of zeros. And if you want more details on that, you have to go back and refer to the lecture on root locus design. Since this is the review of the course, we are just only going to go through the concept and the formula. The concept is that this is like a center of gravity or center point of the root locus, and the formula is given like this. So this tells you how to calculate this point. Root locus exists on real axis if this is rule number 6, which is very important rule, which I always used first. Like, this is the first rule I use when I sketch the root locus myself. Root locus exists on real axis if the number of poles and zeros to the right of the test point is odd. So if you put a marker on the real axis, and to the right side of your marker point, if the number of poles and zeros are odd, then the root locus will exist at that point. Existence of root locus means that at least one of the poles is passing through that point on real axis. Angle of departure or arrival is calculated using the angle condition, and intersection with j omega axis of the root locus is calculated using the Routh-Hurwitz criteria. Breakaway and break-in points are calculated by the derivative with respect to S of the open loop transfer function, and the gain at any point of the root locus is calculated by this formula, which is derived from the magnitude condition. Sum of all this S is the point at which we want to find the gain, and Pi are the pole locations of the open loop transfer function, and Zi are the zero locations of the open loop transfer function. So this is not exactly the pole location, because pole is located at minus Pi, but here this is plus Pi. So it's important to remember that this is not the exact location. This is the exact location. Minus Pi is the exact location, and minus Zi exact location. This is the S plus Pi, which is the negative of the location of the pole. Alright, so these are the 10 rules of root locus, and then we look at an example of the root locus. We want to construct the root locus for the following transfer function: g of s h of s equal s plus 1 over s minus 1 into s plus 2, which has a 0 at minus 1, another 0 at plus 1, a pole at plus 1 and a pole at minus 2. So we apply rule number 1, 2 and 3 do not require any calculations. Rule number 4 implies that in this example there will be one asymptote, because there are two poles and one zero. So one pole will converge to one of the zeros, and the other pole will have to go to infinity. Then rule number 5 results in the centroid point being equal to 0, and then rule number 6 predicts the root locus in the segments minus 1 to 1 and minus infinity to 2, because if you look at this segment, to the right of this segment there is one pole, and to the right of this segment there is two poles and one zero, which is total number is 3. And rule number 7 predicts the angle of departure of both the poles to be pi, and rule number 8 predicts the j omega axis intersection to be at 0, and rule number 9 does not give any real breakaway or break-in points, because in this example there are no breakaway or break-in points. We do not need rule number 10 for sketching purposes. We only need this rule for some control design purposes. So the root locus becomes something like this. So this pole goes to infinity at an angle of 180 degrees. This pole goes to this 0 at an angle of 180 degrees as well. The j omega intersection is at 0. The center of the root locus is also at 0. So this is the asymptote. So this asymptote appears to originate from this 0 point. Alright, so example of root locus, we can look at another example, and where we have like here 5 poles, 2 of the poles at the origin and 3 poles as the solution of this third order polynomial, and there are 2 zeros, and you can see here that 2 zeros and 2 poles at the origin break away right at the origin and go to the zeros. Excuse me. The 3 poles make 3 asymptotes, one at 180 degree, the other pole makes an asymptote at 60 degree, and the third pole makes an asymptote at minus 60 degree, and then when you sketch this back, this appears to be the point of centroid point where the asymptote appear to originate from. So root contour is the next topic that we discussed in this course, where we studied the root locus with respect to system parameter. So oftentimes it is required that you determine where the poles of the system will go with respect to certain quantity that is a parameter of the system itself. For example, if you are building an aeroplane and you're wondering how would the poles of this aeroplane look like if I change the length of the wings or the width of the wings and so on. So then there is s to the power. So this is an example of root locus with respect to parameter. So assume that p is some parameter in the system, and this is the characteristic equation of the system, of the physical system, with the p involved in it. So if p is the variable parameter in the system, and we are interested in knowing what happens to the poles of the system when. So there is no concept of open or closed loop here. There is just one system, there is no controller, and we are trying to look at the poles of the system itself, the poles of the plant itself, and with respect to change in certain parameter. So problem is that we construct root locus with respect to p. P is assumed to be the gain of the root locus, and for that we need some sort of an open loop transfer function. Since in this original problem there is no open or closed loop, we create an artificial open loop transfer function. By doing that, so we separate the coefficients or powers, the terms in this polynomial with and without the parameter. So the terms with p are separated from the terms without p, and the terms that involve p parameter are denoted by q of s, and the terms without p are denoted as p of s. So I'll show you in a minute. So the solution, step 1 is the separate terms with and without p. So in this case, by separating this term, the new open loop transfer function will be p times q of s and divided by p of s. So we construct the root locus using this new system, which is artificially created open loop system. Then given the characteristic equation, this is given to us. So if we separate the terms, then these are the terms involving p, and all of these terms do not involve p. So we have, this is our p of s, and this will become q of s, and then p will become the root locus gain. And the new system has the following poles and zeros. So poles are at minus 1.5 plus minus 5j, 0.28 plus minus 0.62j, and a pole at minus 0.55, and zeros of the system are at 0 and minus 17.22. So we apply the 10 rules of root locus, and we get the path of the poles with respect to p. This is how the poles will change. So initially when p is 0, the poles of the plant will be at these locations, and as you increase the p, the poles of the plant will go into follow these paths which are shown in the root locus. So these zeros are artificial zeros, because in reality we are only looking at the poles of the transfer function, and we do not know. So these zeros are generated from the artificial open loop transfer function, so we can just ignore these zeros, other than the fact that if p is large enough, then these are the locations of the poles of open loop, at least two of the poles of the plant or a system that is under study. So if you magnify this part of the root locus, then you get this type of diagram, and then dealing with non-causality situation, because in the root locus with respect to parameter we are creating an artificial open loop transfer function. So it can happen that the number of zeros are greater than the number of poles. So if the number of zeros are greater than the number of poles, then it is difficult to use the 10 rules of root locus, because we do not know one of the poles will converge to one of the zeros, and what will happen to this zero, or which of the zeros will this pole converge to, we do not know. So how do we deal with this situation? That we convert the poles into zeros and zeros into poles. So here these are the zeros of the artificially created transfer function by making the terms with the parameter and without the parameter separate from each other, as we did in the previous example. And it turns out that the numerator has higher degree, numerator is second order and the denominator is first order. So what we do is we flip the transfer function, we make the numerator equal to denominator and the denominator equal to numerator, and then we construct the root locus in the usual way. So for this system it is easy to construct root locus using the 10 rules. And once we have constructed the root locus, then what we do is we invert the path direction of the root locus, and we also revert back the poles into zeros and zeros into poles, which gives us the original system. So originally there were 2 zeros and 1 pole, and finally after a couple of steps we again have to the same situation, 2 zeros and 1 pole, but now we have also created the root locus of the system. So you can see here that these are the steps: reverse the poles and zeros, so make the zeros to be poles and poles to be zeros, sketch the root locus, then reverse the direction of the root locus and reverse the poles and zeros again. So second reversal will give you the original system with the root locus of that system. So you can see that a pole is coming from infinity towards one of the zeros, which means that if the parameter value is 0, there will be only one pole, other pole will be infinite, which is ignorable. And as you increase the parameter value, this second pole becomes more and more significant. Alright, so then there is example of root locus based analysis of the system. So for example, if we have a second order system and we are trying to design the let's say proportional controller for this system, we can sketch the root locus and we can look into this possible root locus, and we see here that one of the pole, if we are to trying to make this system asymptotically stable, then both of the poles have to come into the left half plane. In this case with Kp, the root locus tells us that the path of the roots or poles is such that the poles always remain in the positive side or the right half plane. So Kp cannot stabilize this system. So P controller cannot stabilize this system. We have concluded this using root locus. Similarly, we can also use some other, like for example phase lead type controller, and then we sketch the root locus with that, and this time the poles do come into the open left half plane, but there is a limit to the transients that can be achieved. For example, these poles break away and come into the left half plane because of this additional zero that we have added using this controller. And there is a but what happens is that what happens is that the root locus is such that the poles actually cannot come to the left side of far enough left into the left half plane with a small imaginary part. The imaginary part contributes to the overshoot. So if we want the overshoot of the system to be, like for example, if we have this type of admissible pole location region, if we want the poles to come into this region, it's impossible using this controller. We have analyzed this using root locus, But if we use, like for example, PD controller, and now we sketch the root locus becomes something like this, which means that the poles actually do come into this type of an admissible region. They come into this box enclosed by this yellow boundaries. So in this case the poles do. So using root locus we can analyze whether a certain controller will work in achieving certain transient response characteristics or not. So this is one of the key advantages of root locus that we will see in when we review the controller design. Then we study the effect of adding poles and zeros using the root locus theory. Before we studied the effect of adding a poles and zeros just theoretically, without any grounding or without any theoretical foundations underlying. But here we can have the root locus foundation for our arguments. That you can see here that this is the number of asymptotes with only one pole excessive with respect to zeros. If you add another pole, the asymptotes straighten up, and if you add another pole, the asymptotes start going towards the right side. And if you add another pole, then the asymptotes start going towards the right side at a faster speed. So this angle is 60 degrees with respect to x-axis. This is slow. The horizontal speed of this vector is slow. The horizontal component of this vector is smaller compared to the horizontal component of this vector, which is 45 degree with respect to real axis. Then adding a pole in general bends the root locus to the right, which is not good. And we also discussed earlier that adding poles in the system can make the response sluggish and may even destabilize the system. And now we see the same thing theoretically using the root locus theory. So next is effect of adding a zero. So you can see the root locus of a transfer function without zero that we just saw previously with the P controller, and then with phase lead compensator, where we add a zero but we also add a pole. So but effect of adding this zero was to make this root locus come towards the left side, and if we add a zero without adding the pole, then it is even better. So this pole causes some sluggishness in this response, and if you remove this pole, the response becomes even better in terms of achieving certain less overshoot and higher settling time, as faster settling time. So we can shift the root locus to the left by adding zero appropriately, and system with zeros in the open right half plane is called non-minimum phase system, which is not studied in this course. An important fact about non-minimum phase systems is that the step response of a non-minimum phase system starts off in the opposite direction. So instead of going up, the step response of a non-minimum phase system first goes down and then it goes up. So but these discussions are not included in this course. And that is the end of the third part of the course review, and we have reviewed about 75% of this linear control systems course. And next time we shall be going through the final course review part, and that will conclude the series of course review. And before I finish this lecture off, I would briefly like to go through the whole lecture in a couple of minutes, or maybe 3 minutes, so that you have a short recap of what we have studied during this lecture. So if I go back the slides, then we started off this lecture with the transient response discussion. So we started off today's lecture with transient response specifications of LTI systems, which include percentage overshoot, settling time, rise time, and delay time. And we also looked at the graphical depiction of what settling time looks like, and what delay time, rise time, and what is the maximum value of the output look like. And then we look at the transient response of first order system. Very important part, that first order system never incurs the overshoot, and here you can see that the slope at the beginning of the step response is not close to zero, it's just a normal non-zero slope. And settling time is for first order system 3 times the time constant, time delay is about 0.7 times time constant, and rise time is about 2.3 or 2.2 times the time constant. Second order systems, we have natural frequency, damping ratio, which play a significant role in pole locations of the second order system. And these are the pole locations with a general complex pole. That horizontal distance of the pole from the j omega axis is zeta times omega n, and the cosine of the angle of the pole from the real axis is zeta itself. And so we looked at the classification of second order systems. There is an overdamped system, and its difference of its step response from that of the first order system is almost zero slope at the beginning. Then there is a critically damped system with both poles still on the real axis, but both poles are equal in this case. The step response has no overshoot. Then there is underdamped system, where the most interesting step response is for underdamped systems. Then there is undamped system, which is not asymptotically stable, but it is stable in the sense of Lyapunov, and it has an oscillatory response. Double integrator system, which is unstable, and both the poles are at the origin. Then there is second order system, settling time, rise time, peak time, percentage overshoot, delay time. So we studied all the formulas for the standard second order system. Then we looked at the controller design example for second order system, and we used the actually closed loop characteristic equation and the roots of the closed loop characteristic equation for this design. We looked at the actual characteristic equation, and we derived the desirable characteristic equation depending upon the requirements of the problem. And then we, by comparing the coefficients, we designed the controller gains. Then final design is of course a PD controller, and this type of design is not always possible. This example was an easy one. Sometimes it is, well, in terms of if the desirable pole locations are not strict enough for the controller and the plant, then you can always find the gains. But if they are too strict for the controller and the plant, then you might have to try PDD controller, for which, you know, working with the working directly with the solution polynomial is not very easy, but probably it can be done. But another effective way of designing controller is of course with the help of root locus. Effects of adding poles and zeros. So we always add poles or zeros using the controller in the left half plane. Adding poles makes the response sluggish or may even destabilize the system, and adding zeros make the response faster and increases the overshoot, and may increase the overshoot. So then there is a concept of dominant poles which are close to the j omega axis, and in non-significant poles which are far away from the j omega axis. This theory can be used to reduce a higher order transfer function into a lower order transfer function if there is a case where there is a dominant pole and there is a clear insignificant pole. So you can drop the insignificant pole, but by preserving the DC gain of the transfer function. Then there is another way of cancelling poles and zeros, which is by pre-compensator design. And then there is root locus. We discussed that basic notations and definitions of root locus, and the angle condition, the magnitude condition, um, the return difference, and then we reviewed the 10 rules of root locus, and then we looked into the example of root locus, and we looked at another example. By the way, in MATLAB you can use the command rlocus to construct the root locus of a system. Then we looked at root locus with respect to certain parameter of the system, which is called root contour, and we construct an artificial open loop transfer function by rearranging the terms with and without the parameter, and then we construct the root locus to find where the poles of the system will go if we change the value of the parameter. Dealing with non-causality in this case is we flip the poles and zeros, we sketch the root locus, we flip the direction of the root locus, and we flip the poles and zeros again to get the original poles and zeros, and that gives us the root locus with respect to parameter gain. And that's the analysis of a system with respect to root locus, that we can find out which controller will work and which controller will not work with the help of root locus, which is very difficult when you are working without root locus, just based on the as we did before in the second order controller design example. We were working with the characteristic equation and roots of characteristic equation. It is very difficult to know in that case which controller will work and which will not work, especially in terms of achieving the transient response characteristics. And then we look at an example where PD controller was able to bring the poles into admissible pole locations, and then we look at effect of adding poles and zeros with respect to the root locus asymptote theory, which gives us the same thing, that adding poles makes the response sluggish or may even destabilize the system, and adding zeros usually will make the response faster. And that is all for today. I hope the lecture was understandable, and if not, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you for listening.